This begins the second part of the preliminary discussion about the new English curriculum proposal. Now that we have seen the general structure for moving up grade and proficiency levels, let's take a closer look at the curriculum. For now, we will not look at the third cycle, however. More work is currently being done on it. The original intent was to work on cycles 1 and 2, and then later on to work with cycle 3. Now, you're looking at this slide that talks about goals and outcomes, and that's what we're going to look at next. For each grade and proficiency level, there is a set of competencies that are prescribed by the Common European Framework, and those are called the can-do statements. And basically they show what learners will be able to do at each level of competence. For our purposes, these statements are used as goals in what we call the scope and sequence, but for our purposes, we'll call them goals and outcomes. Each goal is now accompanied by a statement showing how students will be able to provide evidence of their learning. Those statements are called outcomes. When writing the outcomes, I was concerned with making sure the evidence of learning could be used for assessment and that they were matched to the learner's linguistic and developmentally appropriate levels of functioning. To do so, this work was informed by the work done by the WIDA Consortium, the World Instructional Design and Assessment Consortium, and the Arizona English Proficiency Standards. The goals are differentiated in rising expectations, and that differentiation occurs by the amount of language, the complexity of discourse, and the type of vocabulary that's used, along with expanding literacy levels. So, for example, an A1.1 would be, the student would be working at the word level, and later on an A2 level student would be working with a phrase or sentence level and more open questions. So that's how you can see the rising expectation in their competencies. And this comes from the WIDA resource guide, but it parallels very well with the Common European Framework levels as well. Correspondingly, the outcome statements also show rising levels in expectations. However, with outcomes, what I did was I inserted the scaffolding that should be also evident in the kind of instructional support that students will be using in order to reach the level of competency desired. So you'll see that there are varying levels of instructional support, varying by the kind of sensory scaffolding or scaffolding by the type of interaction, whether the kids are working in pairs, in quads, in whole group, or individually, whether they're using some of their native language to understand the target language, especially at the beginning levels, and how much of the graphic um, input is being used to help them make sense of the information that they're working with. So again, the outcome statements show how students in what environments instructionally the students will be able to reach their level, that desired level of competence to show their learning. So here is the language development route. And this is how the goals and the outcomes are related. So for example, in grade 1, which we're sort of calling a pre-A1, as the students are getting used to the sounds of the language and operating within school and operating within an English language classroom, we're not putting too much pressure on them. That's why we're calling them an A1 level. What we're saying is that students will be able, the goal is based on the can-do statements. Uh, this is the competence that we're working. Here we want that the students can recognize and understand the words for people around them, such as teacher, mother, brother, doctor. Since they're both in grades 1 and 2 working at an A1 level, they're having the same competence goals, the same can-do statement. Um, what differs for them are in the outcomes. So what we want to think about for the outcomes is that students can show understanding with teacher modeling and interaction within the context of familiar stories, dialogues, or songs by pointing, matching, drawing pictures after slow, clear enunciation on the part of the speaker. So in this context of instruction, the students will be able to show that they've reached the competence goal that is outlined here. However, in grade 2, the outcome is differentiated so that now we're asking the students not to just point, but to even label the pictures. So there's a little bit of writing involved. The goal changes a bit for that competence. So because they're now working at an A1.2 level in grade 3. So here the goal changes to can understand some words and expressions when others are talking about themselves, their family, or their classroom, provided the speech is clear and slow. They can show their understanding by matching pictures, writing words, completing a graphic organizer, or a sentence frame. So you see an expanding amount of language being used and amount of literacy that is expected for them. Here in grade 4, working at an A2.1 level, the goal changes a bit so that here it reads, the students can understand phrases and high frequency vocabulary related to areas of personal interest. Since they're in grades 4 and 5, working at an A2.1 level, the same can-do competence is listed here as the goal. However, again, for the outcomes, students can show understanding in pairs, small group work, and finally independently by, and you can see here for grade 4, there's more instructional support for them. Here they're selecting these phrases in high frequency vocabulary from drawings, word phrase banks, that kind of thing, and including them when writing their own descriptions. And here there's a higher expectation when we're asking the students to work independently on this. Here they can be working more in pairs and small group work. And here they're being asked to work independently on this competence. And then finally in grade 6, when they reach an A2.2 level, the goal shifts a bit more and it reads, can understand a presentation on a topic when the subject is familiar to them and it is delivered slowly and clearly. Okay? And they can show their understanding by taking notes within a graphic organizer. And here it doesn't specify whether the students can do it in pairs or small group work or independently. That's written a little more at an open level so that there's more variability in the way that the students can show their understanding. But by taking notes, they still need to be accountable to that learning individually. Here is another example of how the goals and outcomes work. For third grade, for example, these are the goals. These are the can-do statements listed as goals. These are the competencies. So this is for the speaking, interaction, and production domain for language. Um, these are the goals. So for speaking, students can express a lack of understanding through learned expressions. They can show that they've met this goal by using learned expressions, and the expressions are actually written out here. For each goal and outcome, they're matched to a unit that is taught at that grade level. So as you can see, for each grade level, we're working with the domains of listening, speaking, reading and writing, and language forms, which are grammar. Okay, and they are matched to the units that are taught for that grade. The goals and outcomes, however, are still written in a very broad manner. So they're written more for a unit level planning, but not yet for a weekly lesson. So I've worked with the advisors to learn how to turn the goals into objectives in the way that I've made the proposal for this curriculum. So whereas goals can have language like to know, understand, learn, appreciate, value, those verbs are still too general. They're too vague. They're not observable. So the goals need to be turned into objectives by using language that is more specific, measurable, and observable. So in the end, the goals turn into weekly objectives by using this kind of terminology. Students will be able to, this is this or that, students will be able to, the student will be able to, for example, to locate the text structure in an essay or to summarize a story in a graphic organizer. In this sense, the goal is turned into an objective that is more accessible. Here is another example. For the listening goal, students can generally identify changes in the topic of discussion if people speak slowly using, and here's the outcome, the goal and the outcome, using sentence frames to sequence events from information presented in read-alouds, presentations, and conversations. As you can see, this is pretty broad and generic. So to turn it into a weekly lesson level statement that is more workable, we've turned it into an objective that reads like this. Students will be able to identify changes in the topic of discussion by completing 3 sentence frames to sequence events from a read aloud. So the goals and outcomes that we have been talking about should be evenly balanced throughout the year that the students are studying. Each year will contain 6 units. Across all 6 units, students will then work with the goals and outcomes that are identified for that grade and proficiency level. They will work with them with the listening, speaking, reading, writing domains, language forms or grammar, phonemic awareness, and phonics. All of these competencies are detailed in the goals and outcomes document for each grade level. And then what we've done with the advisors is to create units. Each unit will have 6 weeks, will be 6 weeks long. Weeks 1 and 4 will have a mini book for each week that can, with a series of activities, and can be also used with formative assessment with the mini book each week. And then week 5 will not have a mini book, but it will be a time where students can focus on learning strategies that are related to what they learned in the prior 4 weeks. There can be some sort of a summative assessment done. And it's a time where the teacher can help reinforce areas that were not well learned at that time, or to help enrich some of the aspects of what they were learning. And then week 6 will be an art project that contains multimodal learning. We know that multisensory learning helps to consolidate learning, and that's what the purpose of this piece is. Just as a reminder, the skills for phonemic awareness and phonics can be found under the reading tabs for each grade level and proficiency level in the goals and outcomes document. Each 6-week unit starts with what's called an essential question, and each of these questions should have the following features, and we've put those in for each unit in order to raise the level of thinking for each unit so that students can have their intellectual interest stimulated throughout the unit, thereby motivating them to continue learning. Each essential question then engenders an answer, and these answers are thought of as what we call enduring understandings. This is all part of the work from Backwards Design, And the enduring understandings are basically what's left when all the small details are forgotten when we learn something. What are the big picture ideas? And so we want to make sure that we've identified those and help our students get to those points across each unit. Here are examples of how essential questions and enduring understandings relate. I'll show the first one. So an essential question like, how does where you live influence how you live? The answer, the enduring understanding, would be the geography, climate, and natural resources of a region influence the economy and lifestyle of the people living there. Now, what we will do in the units is that we will help students to phrase their enduring understanding at a level that matches their proficiency level as well. To do so, we've worked with language functions. These are language functions that are based on cognitive levels of thinking. So for example, beginning level learners, so A1 level learners, A1 or A2 level learners at the first or second grade level would be working with describing nouns, and they would work with a sentence frame, such as this one, like a square has four sides. This would help them to answer the essential questions, but using a sentence frame that reflects their level of proficiency at the time that they're working with that unit. There are three types of language functions, and the ones that you just saw are based on Bloom's higher thinking levels. And they work best in cycles 1 and 2 because we're integrating the topics of the units with the other academic areas that the students are working with at that grade level, especially drawing from social studies and science themes. They are also working with the kinds of language functions called communicative competence functions, where students are using language functions to do these kinds of things, imparting and seeking information, communication, repair, and that sort of thing. But the more complex uh, language functions in this area will start to appear more in cycle 3 as their proficiency level rises. And you also have other kinds of language functions, such as those identified by Barber, that are related to genres. And you'll see more of an emphasis in the public and professional domains with these kinds of discourse functions in cycle 3. Within each unit and within each weekly lesson, the task-based approach is used. And as you can see, the way that Rod Ellis has termed it is a very clear way of showing what we mean by tasks and how they are related to units in weekly lessons. A task is an activity which requires learners to use language with an emphasis on meaning to obtain an objective. A key word here is meaning. And so when we were putting together each unit, we were concerned with the following. Does each unit engage learner interest? Is there primary focus on meaning? Are outcomes present? Is task completion prioritized? And do each of the tasks relate to real-world activities? These principles from Willis and Willis, as well as the subset of principles here that come from Paul Nation's book on curriculum design, show that meaning is important, meaning-focused input. There also needs to be a time where there is a focus on language learning, that the output is also meaning-focused, and that there are fluency activities. These sub-activities help to create a balance of the four language domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And there also needs to be deliberate learning of the sound, spelling, vocabulary, grammar, and discourse systems of the language. For these reasons, each unit will have at least 4 books, and these are what I call mini books. Each mini book will have a whole text where the focus again is on meaning. And these mini books will provide the basis for the curriculum as it is delivered to the students. It is a low cost delivery system because each of the mini books should be easy to print out on 1 or 2 pages, and they can be used either as a big book or they can be printed off as a small book for each student or each pair of students. So the base for learning, the central base for learning, is centered around a mini book. The mini books can do a lot of things that will work with the goals and outcomes for each unit. The language that is shown in the mini books can be sociolinguistically appropriate. It can contain the language forms that will be used as a unit of study. They'll contain the speech acts and exponents within specific scenarios, so the actual language chunks that are used within language functions. The books can also be used as a basis for linguistic and phonological analysis, and they can contain high frequency vocabulary that the students can intuitively and sometimes even explicitly learn throughout their lessons. The mini books are also should be used as models for natural language use, um, whole text so that students can see how language comes together in one meaningful um, body of work instead of looking at a lot of discrete level language skills that they should also do, but they should do it within the context of a whole meaningful piece. The mini books can also model various genres, so we can have narrative genres, especially at the beginning levels, but we can also have nonfiction and expository genres, interactional genres also modeled within these mini books. The mini books should also model a respect for diversity and openness, and they should also contain language that is meaningful, relevant, and one step beyond the learner's present level of competence. So if the students are working at an A1.1 level, the books might show language that's just a little bit beyond the A1.1 level, because then the books serve to gradually pull language development to the next step. Here is a sample mini book. My province. There are many places in my province. Let's find out what a few of them are. What is this place? It is a beach. People come here to swim. What is this place? It is a store. People come here to shop. What is this place? It is a banana field. Workers come here to work. What is this place? It is an office building. Office workers come here to work. What is this place? It is a soccer field. People come here to play ball. What is this place? It is a church. People come here to pray. People do many things in my province. What do you do in your province? As you see here, this beginning level mini book has the following characteristics: high visual support, controlled text, patterned sentences and phrases, repeating vocabulary, natural language, large print, wide letter spacing, familiar concepts, and limited text on a page. Each mini book, depending on the level, will have a set of um, characteristics like these that help take students from one level to the next. Those of you that have a copy of this presentation um, on its own without the narration will be able to hyperlink onto this link right here, and it will show what the characteristics are for each proficiency level and grade level. I will leave you with this slide as a review of this presentation, and I hope that it gives you a better idea of the proposal for the English language curriculum for cycles 1, 2, and 3 and differentiated education. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.